Welcome to our podcast, AI in Real Life, Real Talk with Real Experts, an effort on behalf of the AI Institute for Societal Decision Making. In this podcast, we dive deep into how artificial intelligence shapes our world and everyday decision. I'm Katie, the host of this podcast and an undergraduate at Carnegie Mellon University. Today, we'll dive deep into the fascinating world of decision making with Professor Coty Gonzalez. Coty is a research professor in the Department of Social and Decision Sciences at Carnegie Mellon University and co-director of AI-SDM. Coty, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Could you briefly introduce yourself and your lines of research?
Sure. Thank you so much, first of all, for the invitation. I am a full research professor in social and decision sciences. I am also the founding director of the Dynamic Decision Making Laboratory, as well as a co-director for the Institute of AI in Societal Decision Making. And I've been at CMU for close to 27 years. So quite a long time.
Yeah, wow, that's fascinating. Okay, from what I've learned, your work basically revolves around the term called dynamic decision making. And I'm wondering what that entail and then how it differs from the general decision making process.
Yeah, so in general, the word dynamic entails change, right? So dynamic decision making are decisions that are made in environments that are continuously changing over time. So to really help understand the concept of dynamic decision making, I need to make a contrast to static decision making. So in static decision making, which is actually the kind of decision making that is most commonly studied in the behavioral sciences, in this type of decision making, you usually have very explicit alternatives that are described. So they are fully presented to you. So you can imagine an example of a gamble. I can offer you $3 for sure, or I can offer you to play a lottery. And the lottery would give you $8 with a probability, let's say, of 0.4 or zero otherwise. So if I ask you what would you choose between those two, you probably, if you go with the majority of people, would decide to choose the $3 for sure. Yeah. So this is an example of a static decision-making task, which is actually a very common way in which we study decision-making in the behavioral sciences. But in contrast to that kind of decision-making, what we do in my lab is to study decisions under uncertainty, with time constraints, where there are changes occurring over time. And so you don't have a description in those kind of situations. You don't know the outcomes, so sometimes you don't even know the potential probabilities, right? So you'd rather need to discover the outcomes over time as you are making sequential choices. So dynamic decision-making involves a sequence of decisions, and those decisions are interdependent over time. Those decisions are also influenced by exogenous events, such as time pressure, of course, uncertainty, workload, other people's decisions, and things like that. So this is sort of the contrast between, traditional, let's say, decision-making, which is static, and dynamic tasks.
I see. Thanks for your explanation. And I believe that since you are the co-director of AI-SDM, I believe your work must be interact with the AI or the tech side a lot. I wonder, could you explain how does the AI or this kind of technologies integrate to your lines of research?
Yeah, well, AI is making an impact in our society everywhere, right? Everywhere we go, we see already the influence of AI. In particular, for the AI-SDM, we look at the intersection between decision-making and the technology algorithms, particularly in this case, machine learning algorithms that are studied in the computer science area. But we look at this intersection between behavioral decision sciences and the technological side. What we also try to do is to figure out how to influence or what is the impact of that interaction in use cases that are naturalistic use cases, such as disaster management or health policies and health management. So so in general, we study this idea of decision making in contexts that involve a lot of uncertainty, time constraints, and all that through these two particular use cases.
I see. Okay, but I think like AI is a very broad term, and every time you mention about AI, I was thinking about machine learning, but I think in your case, it might be like another different type of AI. Can you elaborate more on that? Like what type of AI?
Yeah, great. I'm happy you asked the question because indeed the general tendency, especially nowadays, when we think of AI, we tend to think of machine learning. We tend to think on the technological side. And of course, machine learning is a type of AI that has proven to be very useful. But indeed, there is this other aspect of AI that actually was born with the birth of artificial intelligence in general. So back in 1950s with Herb Simon and Alan Newell, they actually, Herb Simon in particular, identified two types of AI. The machine AI, which really intends to really do things that humans cannot do. So, things that involve, for example, large search of data that humans cannot possibly reach. So those are the machine aspects that Simon referred to. But Herb Simon also referred to cognitive AI. And this is a type of AI that has the goal of emulating human behavior. So it's not about overcoming human behavior or making perfect decisions. It's actually about replicating the human errors. So being able to present information or situations in a way that computationally we can create algorithms that are going to be replicating human error, human biases, and just the way humans are. So humans are not perfect, definitely not maximizers, and we involve or are immersed in a set of biases that need to be taken into account when we are building these systems, right? So AI indeed can be conceptualized in so many different ways these days, but I can see at least those two types of AI, and I like to refer to them as cognitive AI and machine AI to clearly make the distinction between what our goals are, right, and what are the kind of situations we are addressing.
I see. That's so interesting. Then just moving to your specifics of your research, what are the main projects that you are currently leading within AI-SDM, and how are these projects aiming at enhancing the human decision-making process?
Right. So I mostly do basic research, even though I know that most of our work has implications in very applied kind of situations. But in the AI-SDM, I am the thrust lead for building computational models of decision-making, and in particular for decision-making in dynamic tasks. So we have various projects. One project involves creating computational algorithms that would replicate the human decisions in a disaster kind of situation. So dynamic decision making often involves the use of games or micro worlds that replicate a real world situation. And then we construct algorithms that are able to execute a task in that game. So in this case, we have, for example, a task that represents a disaster and represents a disaster in a particular building. There are rooms and there are doors and there are obstacles and victims that are distributed across the building. And so the goal of the decision maker is to figure out how to navigate that building so that they can rescue the victims before they die, right? And so figuring out where to go to maximize human life in that case is the goal of that algorithm. Now, we usually, because our type of research involves comparison to actual human decision making, we actually run experiments too with those tasks. So we are able to bring human participants and we provide them with a particular scenario, and they are able to make interactive decisions in the same exact situation in which we have computational models making decisions, right? Yeah. And so the advantage of this approach is that we can compare the computational predictions of our algorithms with the actual human behavior, right? And so by making that comparison, we can figure out whether our algorithms are accurate at emulating the human process or not, right? Yeah. And this helps us improve these algorithms and make them more accurate over time, more accurate in their representation of the human error and human bias. So that's what we mean by accurate here, right? And I am also, involved with disaster management under the goal of trying to deploy our algorithms someday and be able to improve the decisions that actual people in disaster management make. Yeah. And so we have been working in particular with American Red Cross, looking at how disaster managers are trained. And interestingly enough, they are trained using games. So we just visited the American Red Cross, and they are actually trained with a tabletop game. These are difficult situations and difficult decisions to make. If you imagine a particular disaster, let's say flooding, and you have some limited resources such as number of rescuers, food, shelters where you need to send all these people, and figuring out how to allocate those resources to maximize the benefit of human life, it's a very, very hard set of decisions to make, right? And they are, of course, interdependent over time because the disaster is evolving, right, as they are making those choices. And so the situation can get much worse, or it can improve over time. So the whole exercise involves particular scenarios of decision making and how the managers handle those scenarios. So our overall goal in that case is to be able to use our models to improve the way disaster managers are learning in those environments.
Thank you so much for your overview of your work in AI-SDM. Can you tell me a little more about your work in other part of your lab?
Sure. Yes, in my dynamic decision-making laboratory, AI-SDM is one of several other projects. So currently we are, and we have actually several grants that relate to cybersecurity. Cybersecurity has been a very popular theme of research in my lab for at least 10 years. And the reason is that it is very interesting from the human aspect and human decision-making in particular. So there are three types of humans in those kind of situations: the attackers, the defenders, and the end users. And we are able to apply very similar kind of modeling approaches and experimental approaches to study things like phishing. In that case, it would be the end user decision making. But we also study hackers. And for example, in a recent grant from IARPA, we are studying biases from the attacker's perspective. And the whole goal is to be able to develop better defenses by understanding what are the errors that attackers might make in intruding in our information systems. So that way we are able to detect those biases and then use that information to defend our networks better. So this type of research is currently actually quite common in my lab, and the kind of methods that we use can be applicable to many other aspects like air traffic control or any decisions under uncertainty.
That's impressive. I believe this is a vital work that you're doing, and I'm very impressed by that. But as we look towards the future of decision making, I know there's common concerns about the AI is potentially replacing the human judgment. And can you discuss AI-SDM's approach to this concern? Are there scenarios where human inputs remains vital, and how does AI-SDM enhance human decision making rather than replacing them?
I believe that humans will always be in the loop. I believe humans are essential for human life. I mean, humans are the ones that develop those algorithms. Humans are the ones that use those algorithms too. And ultimately, higher level decision making is always going to be human. For many reasons. Some of the reasons are there is not enough data, and many of these machine learning algorithms are data hungry, right? So they need data to be able to make accurate predictions.
Yes.
But there is not enough data, especially in high level decision making, right? You imagine how many disasters there might be and how many decisions we can collect data, from this disaster management. And how different each of those disasters are. They are very different. In fact, each disaster is unique. So, how much are these algorithms going to be able to do, even under the assumption that we have the data? Mm-hmm. I don't think we can do a lot. I think that the human will always be in the loop. That being said, I just told you that our goal is to actually replicate human decision making, right? But I think it is important to clarify that we don't aim at replacing humans. What we want to do is be able to predict human error. Again, the human biases and the accurate prediction of human biases will allow us to help humans better, right? So if we are able to generate these algorithms that make decisions the way humans make and be able to predict those decisions, then we can use machine learning algorithms that can emulate or modify the environment in a way that humans can learn to make better decisions over time, in a way that humans can improve the way they make those decisions. So ultimately, the prediction of these errors, I think, will help this human in the loop situation with the machine AI too.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. To our listeners, remember that you can dive deeper into these topics by visiting our website at www.cmu.edu/AI-SDM, where you can also submit your questions for future guests. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more in-depth discussions on how AI shapes our society. Join us next time on AI in Real Life for more real talks with real experts. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to having you with us next time on AI in Real Life.